Welcome to the Talent Current by Root Edge, a podcast about what's happening in talent right now, with a special focus on the people powering the energy and infrastructure transition. I'm your host, Mindy Prefling. I've spent nearly a decade in recruitment, helping some of the most influential companies in renewable energy, power, and digital infrastructure build the teams that drive their growth. Over the years, I've led high-performing recruitment teams, partnered with some of the industry's largest players, and launched and hosted the Soapbox series, a podcast where I spoke with leaders across energy and infrastructure about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, with the Talent Current, I'm evolving those conversations forward. Each episode, we dive into honest discussions with industry leaders about hiring, leadership, culture, and what it takes to stay grounded in a constantly shifting landscape. We'll explore everything from executive search and organizational strategy to leadership coaching and the changing workplace landscape. And we'll shine a light on the women breaking ground in traditionally male-dominated spaces. At Root Edge, our mission is simple: connecting people to energize tomorrow. And this podcast is an extension of that mission. Whether you're scaling a company or building your own career, the Talent Current is your place to stay plugged into how work is changing and who's driving it forward. Thank you for joining me on the Talent Current, and especially for our first in-person recorded episode here in my home at my podcast production studio. I was thinking about maybe like side hustling a podcast studio at my apartment.
Well, based on the setup that we just went through, I think you have a little bit further to go.
Didn't nail it. Yeah, thank you for that feedback. I'm pleased to have Aaron Nichols here on the Talent Current today. He's the research and policy expert for Exact Solar, but actually you've recently changed your title. Can you remind me what that new title is again?
Yeah, I changed my title to storytelling and policy specialist. I think I didn't closely identify with research and policy specialist. It's a title that we made up for PR. My title was something like marketing and advocacy specialist. And then I handle PR at Exact Solar, and journalists just kept telling us that we don't want to talk to a marketing guy. Mm-hmm. And so we just kind of threw up a smokescreen. But then, I'm not a researcher. I'm not a PhD candidate. I'm a marketing and sales guy through and through.
Okay. So I think this is a great opportunity to talk about what storyteller is and what storytelling is, and maybe what the difference is between storytelling and marketing, if there is one.
I definitely think good marketing is storytelling, but I've been really interested in this lately because there's a lot of companies that have started using storytelling in job descriptions and have started hiring storytellers. And I'm very protective of the term. I don't want it to become a meaningless corporate buzzword that people just kind of mouth at each other and then walk away not knowing what the other one said. And so I really have done a lot of work just personally. I mean, I went on Nico Johnson's Suncast podcast last month and promoted an article I had written called 4 Rules of Storytelling That Corporate America Desperately Needs. And there's a couple different things there that I think are really needed in the clean energy world. The first of those being just bringing things down to earth. And that's the first rule I put in the article, was tell one story at a time. This is one of my favorite psychological biases. And one of the things that is quite interesting about people is that we pretend to speak numbers, but we don't actually speak numbers. Like, we hear big numbers and then we pretend that they mean something to us. And we're like, important person said big thing. That's probably bad. We don't really know what it means.
Yeah. So I think what I'm hearing is we're missing the mark on actually the impact of the story that we're trying to tell. That marketing oftentimes is about telling people what this massive problem is, but storytelling is bringing it back to why this impacts you as an individual.
Yeah. Well, think about all of the best marketing campaigns of all time. Think about the slogans that you remember. If we're talking about I'm Loving It by McDonald's or Just Do It by Nike, those are very, very simple words. But the thing that happens automatically, especially in a field like energy, where it's a lot of very brilliant, very technically minded people who often have very advanced degrees, you have a culture of being rewarded for overcomplicating things. And you don't have a culture of being rewarded for simplifying things. And when we're in a battle for the fate of the earth, we can't afford to bore people to death.
Mm-hmm.
And we are facing an opponent, the fossil fuel industry, that has had no trouble just creating quick, quippy messaging and misinformation and putting that out for years and years and years. And we seem to think of ourselves as this like educated high road.
Mm.
And in my opinion, it's one of the reasons we got our butts kicked in the lead up to the One Big Beautiful Bill. We just weren't prepared.
Mm. That's a great segue because you had mentioned I listened to your episode on Suncast with Nico, which was a brilliant episode. And I think you mentioned that we went wrong somewhere with the One Big Beautiful Bill as I guess as an industry. We missed the mark.
Mhm.
Where do you think we missed the mark, or if we could go back and do it different and better, what would you suggest?
I would tie it to what I was just saying about the 3 million people going hungry versus one starving child. The thing that I saw over and over and over again was if this legislation passes, we're going to lose 10,000 jobs. We're going to lose 100,000 jobs. 4 gigawatts of projects are going to be canceled. All this stuff. Like the average person barely knows how the electricity gets to their house and doesn't care.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And a number like a gigawatt means nothing to them. Now, it's a masterful thing that I think happened too little too late last year was there was an article that went live in the New York Times shortly before Georgia ousted a couple of public utility commissioners and got some commissioners and got some fresh blood in. And it was about a single mother who had voted for Trump. She had 3 kids and her energy bills were just spiraling out of control because in Georgia, they have had some of the craziest power increases that the country has seen. And that story helped move public opinion in a way that saying, you know, 5,000 people's bills went up couldn't have. And it's like when we're saying if this legislation passes, we're going to lose 10,000 jobs, we're going to lose 100,000 jobs, like, sure. But if you want the public to be interested, Jim's going to lose his job. Like, go talk to Jim. Jim has a family. Jim just, a couple of years ago got off substances and built a skill set that he like pulled himself out of a bad lifestyle with. And now his wife and kids, who he was on the rocks with, just absolutely adore him. And if this legislation passes, it's very likely that he's going to be laid off. And that's going to happen 100,000 times.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have to scale it back and make it more personal and digestible for people. I heard you say either in your article or on the episode with Nico was if something's really, really big, like a really big problem, people can't wrap their head around it. So they just move on for it.
Right. Think about the Humane Society.
Mm-hmm.
You see one puppy at a time that you can help when you go on their website. If they showed you a picture of 500 dogs, you immediately glaze over it. You're like, that's terrible, but I can't do anything about that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have room for 500 dogs.
Yeah. Even though I would love to have room for
We all
500 dogs. That was a childhood dream of mine. Okay. When we got introduced, or when we introduced ourselves to each other is probably a better way of saying it. And you introduced the concept of storytelling to me. Admittedly, it was new. And I've learned a lot this last week, just, listening to you speak about it, reading your 4 Rules of Storytelling. I read that Wall Street Journal article, lots of really good content out there. And you're right. I'm seeing that this is coming up all over corporations in the form of jobs. I think what would be helpful for me and for the audience is maybe like what are the different contexts that storytelling can come up, because we're talking about it in this like very mainstream marketing perspective. But what about like for a leader in an organization or maybe somebody on the job market? How can we apply this in different in different contexts outside of large scale marketing?
It's a wonderful question. I would like to highlight the fact that one of the reasons that I feel like I have something unique to offer is because before I was doing any of this, I trained as an educator.
Mm.
And when you train as an educator, you are not rewarded for overcomplicating things. You are rewarded for simplifying things. You're rewarded for breaking things down to their smallest pieces. And when we're talking about storytelling in a corporate environment, let's start with someone who's like a director of content. When we're in the age of AI, content is fast and cheap.
Mm.
It's very easy to quickly push out content. And that is what the world is demanding of us now, because the half-life of a piece of content is much, much shorter. Like a decade ago, you would see a YouTube video, it was hilarious. You would share it with your friends. It would stick around for like a week. Now it's like you see it once, it's gone. You can't even find it again.
Mhm.
You don't even know where to go. So the first thing is that the role of a storyteller in a larger organization is someone who's overseeing a theme, who is able to keep a common thread, some sort of unifying message through all of this content that we're able to now generate so fast and put out so quickly, and make sure that the values and what you're trying to get across as a company are I don't know, like it's are always there, are
Okay.
always present. When we're talking about leadership, it's really as simple as clarification, like simplifying down, what are we doing? Where are we going? Why are we going there? Why should you follow me on that journey?
Mhm. Yeah. So I think there's like a couple things I want to unpack here. The AI thing, I would love to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But I think what's really interesting, what you're talking about here, is we've got, kind of like the brand story, and with content being, well, there's a lot of pressure to get content out
Yeah.
and a lot of content, and you've got to constantly be evolving and creating. And then how do you, like, what I'm hearing you say is have like a common thread amongst that content, that it all plays back into what your story is. Um, so is that like, do you have to come up with a plan for that? Is that something that's organic? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I guess that's why they hire people, but
I put an exercise in that article, Four Rules of Storytelling, the corporate America desperately needs. And I think if we're just talking about creating a product story, and the work of a great leader is to unify everyone around a common story. But if you're creating a product story, the four things you need to do and write down are: what does our product do? How did we make it do that? Who has it helped by doing that thing? And why should anyone care? If you can nail those and you can get that below a fifth grade reading level, you can spread that out across the whole organization.
and that can be applied to, what is our service? Why do people want our service? Why do people care about our service?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. I want to talk a little bit more about this AI thing. I think you said that you're not a fan of AI.
I've just been a Luddite about it, but someone finally called me out, and I was like, you're right. It's not going anywhere.
I can relate.
Yeah.
I feel similarly, and I think you also said something like, it should be a like additive, or it should be your partner, a content partner, or something to that effect. So there's a lot more people using AI to create more content, and usually you can tell.
Yeah.
They're longer. There's a lot more information. It's like, wow, you became a really good writer
Yep.
overnight, and you didn't have anything before. And I mean, is that okay? Is it okay to kind of, like have more content because you're at least prompting it?
Mm.
And then what are some ways to not get stuck in like AI as your only content creator?
I mean, the most important thing is to write for yourself, to not stop writing,
Mhm.
and to not outsource the entire process. Even just like I can drive a car, but I routinely run around, which is kind of primitive if you think about it. But I know that by running around, I'm not going to just gain weight until my heart fails.
Mm.
And it's the same thing. Like if you just outsource all of your thinking and your creative process to AI, eventually your brain is going to become the equivalent of someone who gains weight until their heart fails. And that's why it's so important to continue to have a place where you capture your thoughts organically.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Like, come up, like, maybe write the template of a post yourself or whatever your medium is, and then you could use AI to help clean it up
Mm.
or, like, polish it up a little bit, or just don't rely on the AI at all.
Well, it depends. But yeah, I mean, just know what you're about.
Mhm.
Know what you stand for.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. So, I think, going back to, the different contexts that we can use storytelling, I'd love to kind of talk about if you have some examples either in our industry or maybe just like modern day examples. We talked about the Humane Society, but are there some influencers? Maybe that's not the right word. Are there some storytellers that you're like, they nailed it? When in doubt, kind of go back to this person and use their process because visuals help.
Yeah, I mean, I tell this story so much because I'm so proud of it. But at Exact, in late 2023, we built an off-grid solar energy system that powers a greenhouse for a school in Philadelphia that is in a food desert. They use that greenhouse to grow organic produce. The students then prepare the extra produce for staff and parents in a restaurant on their campus, and they sell the extra produce in a local farmers market. So not only is that an amazing story, but we got the world to think it was an amazing story. And we reached out to local environmental groups who knew politicians. And then we were all able to, in collaboration, talk to politicians and say, like, you're going to love being photographed in front of this thing. Like, you can come cut the ribbon. There's kids, there's education, there's solar energy. You're going to love this. And then we got some politicians to agree to it. And then we went to the press and we were like, you're going to love taking pictures of the politicians. We got to agree to come here.
Mhm.
And structuring each piece of that story so that there was something interesting for each person was really fun and turned out really well. That got us a bunch of local news coverage and then got us a relationship that then later got us into an NPR piece that went live all over the country.
Wow. Okay. That's a great story. I thought you were going to say something like Taylor Swift. I feel like she really nailed the storytelling thing. Like, that's her whole shtick.
Well, I mean, yeah, tell me.
Well, okay.
I don't
So
follow her that close.
I don't either, but I've recently started watching some of her documentaries because they're really good. And she's such a hard worker. She's
Yeah.
really inspirational. Like, sure, she's a global superstar, but how she got there is really interesting. And I think her songs are, she says she's a storyteller. And the reason why her audience loves her so much is because they can see themselves in these stories, even though, they're personal to her in some way. Everyone can kind of connect with the story behind each song. And then she also has her own story of how she became this pop star phenomenon. She was 13 years old, decided that she wanted to be a musician, made her family move to Nashville and pursue this dream. And, just started playing guitar in like bars live and, built this following. So, she was like a hometown nobody that just had a dream and followed her heart to it. And then, used storytelling in her songs. So
I think she's a master of reinventing herself as well,
mm,
of always telling a new story of who she is. Think of how many evolutions we've had of Taylor Swift. It was
yeah,
like young prodigy, then we had country star, then we had pop star, now we have whatever she's doing now.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, who knows
yeah,
where she's going to go next. And I think that's a really interesting point. So, do you need to recreate the story or evolve the story over time?
of course, yeah. And I mean, this I like to call it myth making as well. Like the whatever someone sees in a public perception isn't quote unquote true. It's in some way airbrushed. It's in some way like narrativized and in some way presented because someone has thought about how they want to put something out, or it's just a snippet of someone's life that they've put out, and then someone makes their own judgments of that person based on nothing. And it's the same with a brand. I mean, what you're trying to do over time is create a myth, create a shared story that people can buy into around what you do, because the behind the scenes isn't very glamorous, but it's what the public sees and what the public decides is true that defines what your thing is.
Yeah.
And so that's the role of a storyteller, or what I like to call a myth maker as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess over time, you also have to consider that people's needs change and the narrative changes. So being able to meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
And I think you said that, meet people where their values are at.
Mhm.
And so you have to cater your message to those values in that moment in time.
Absolutely. And this is such a fun, tricky game because you need to do that at scale. You need to do that one to many to get people interested enough to talk to you. And then you need to have people who are good enough at talking one-on-one, which is the job of sales, to complete that story, to complete that transaction, to continue what someone is doing. And I don't think it's necessarily when I say myth making, it's not pulling the wool over anyone's eyes, but I do believe that the only way people make buying decisions is by dramatically overestimating the effect that a decision is going to have on their lives, because things fade into the background really quickly. We want new things and then we get them and then we forget they exist. And so it's only by getting someone to overestimate the impact that decision is going to have on their lives that you get them to choose to buy the thing.
So I think another place to apply storytelling is obviously in our own lives. And what's really interesting about you is how you got into solar. So I'd love to hear your origin story of how you got into solar.
Yeah. And this is something that's been very, very important for me to present. I mean, I'm just starting my career, but I went through a very fruitless job search after I had gone traveling for a couple of years. And I don't know anything about recruiting. I don't know anything about hiring. I haven't done it yet. But I went through this period of cognitive dissonance where I believed that I had so much to offer, but the world couldn't see that because I had gaps in my resume. And the only way I was able to break in was by first doing contract to hire work, just contracting myself as a copywriter, and eventually coming on full time. But the way that I ended up in clean energy is by meeting circus girls on the beach in Ecuador.
Wow.
So that was.
Can you go a little bit more into detail on what that? Okay.
It all started in January of 2020 when I shipped out for the Peace Corps in Nepal. And it had been one of my dreams for a long time to serve in the Peace Corps. I was completely certain after finishing teacher school that I wasn't going to teach in the US. And then shipped out for Peace Corps. We were there for 7 weeks, and then we were evacuated due to COVID. So the whole thing came crashing down. And I got home and I was like, I sold everything.
Oh, God.
I have nothing. And I had been planning to be gone for 2 years, and I was back. Everybody was disrupted, and so was I. But I then took a teaching job that I had turned down to go to Nepal, in Lauren Boebert's hometown. And I was teaching ESL, and it was just the most isolated, miserable year of my life. I remember I have this visceral emotional memory of finishing my year of teaching, and I was clearing all of the posters off of the wall of my classroom that I had put up because I was so determined to erase any record that I had ever been there. And I remember this colleague that I had that year walking in and telling me, that the janitors will do that, right? And I was like, I have to do this.
This is cathartic.
Yeah.
I feel like about my process.
Exactly. And so I finished that. And then I just went traveling for a year and a half. It was like the world's slowly ramping back up. I don't really know what to do with myself. And I had a ton of fun. I spent a huge amount of time learning how to surf. I did yoga teacher trainings. I did a little bit of circus arts, and
Wow.
I had a wild, fun time. And when I was in Ecuador, where I ended up being for 6 months and just hanging out basically in this one surf village, doing yoga and learning Spanish, I met these amateur circus performers, and that was their passion, is that they would knock doors to sell solar, and then they would take the money they'd made and they would go travel until they ran out of money and had to knock doors again.
Cool.
And they just went to circus camps all around the world. And they invited me on a door-to-door sales trip, and I was awful at it. I was so bad.
It's a tough job.
It's so tough.
Door-to-door sales, no matter what you're selling.
Yeah.
So respect.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So then I continued traveling for a while, for another probably 6 months after that. I was in Southeast Asia.
Wow.
And I went and spent a couple months in Bali. I did an acro yoga teacher training, which is, kind of like partner acrobatics. It was very fun. And I was sitting there and I was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do next. So I signed up for a 6-week installer training through Grid Alternatives. I came home, I completed that, and got on the roofs, built some systems on people's homes. It was really cool. And then I shipped off to rural Alaska and ran summer camps for kids for a summer. And then I came home and nobody would hire me. And I knew that I had this value to bring, and I knew that I wanted to affect the world positively through clean energy. I was like, I know I'm right. But I went through, a bunch of months just applying, getting rejected, not getting any callbacks, getting one interview that didn't go anywhere. I did interview at NREL, but I didn't get that job. And I started freelancing. I started copywriting. And then because I had the NABCEP PV associate training that I'd gotten through Grid Alternatives, I just kept finding solar clients. Nico Johnson met me. He introduced me to a WhatsApp group of returned Peace Corps volunteers that has people all over the industry in it. And I worked for some of the biggest names in the space before eventually coming on with Exact Solar.
Wow. That's such a good story. Like I know that's the whole point, but I don't know if everybody has that much of a story, I mean, I think everybody has a story and I don't want to take away from that.
Yeah.
But I think it's really, when you've got this really dynamic, interesting story where people can kind of see themselves in different parts of it. Like you don't have the standard corporate resume, which I think is really important. And I am so pleased to have you in this context, being that I am a recruiter, and a lot of people, I hope, that are listening to this can relate to either trying to get into the industry now or have in the past, because it's not an easy industry to break into.
It's not.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
How difficult it is. And being passionate is not enough.
Totally. And that's why it's so important to me to share that message, because I know that there's so much talent that goes unused because there's gaps in the resume. And I want to be living proof of that. It's very important to me to not only continue to rise in the industry, but also just always say, like, I didn't come here down a standard road.
I thank you so much for sharing that and the detail behind it, because you had given me a high level part of your story before, but that's really inspiring, I think, for a lot of people, especially the contract to hire bit, because a lot of people who are on the job market are trying to get full-time employment. But that is one avenue to get into the industry. It's like, you know what, give me a shot.
Yeah.
Let me try. I mean, I'm assuming there was some element of that kind of conversation for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really funny. I love telling this story. The president of our company doesn't like me talking about this, but it's so funny. the first message I ever got from Exact Solar, they actually found me on Upwork. I was just contracting on Upwork back then. And he was in a hurry that day. And so the first message I ever got from Exact Solar, now my full-time employer, just started with, "Hey, Jennifer."
How? Why?
Just an accident. Just in a hurry, maybe like copy pasting it. I don't know, but
That's great.
It's one of my favorite stories because it's just how well everything went after that. I mean, like all the cool stuff that's happened since then.
Yeah, it's a good icebreaker.
Yeah.
I think what really strikes me about your story that I like is it's a story of resilience. That, you didn't give up because somebody told you no. You didn't give up because your first entree into solar was hard and, probably disenfranchising, knocking on people's doors in the foreign country. Like, you kept persevering through that because you knew what the end goal was.
I would push back on that. I had no idea what the end goal was.
Oh, you didn't?
I just knew that I wanted to do this.
Okay.
I walked beaches in Southeast Asia where there was just so much trash piling up that no one had any plan to deal with, and that was never going to go away. And I had sat down and thought about what I wanted the rest of my life to be about. And I just knew that I wanted to be here doing this.
So it was more about like the mission behind solar, but you didn't necessarily know like what.
Yeah, I had no idea where it was going to end up.
Yeah.
But and that's also what got me started posting on LinkedIn. In the beginning, it was about survival because I was just like, I was thinking of that 4 months of job search that I had gone through. And even though I was making, money as a contractor and a freelancer, I was just like, if everyone in this small pond knows who I am, that will dramatically decrease the chances that this happens again. And then it's since evolved into something much bigger and much more fun. And I'm having a way better time doing it.
Yeah.
But that's how it started.
Well, is that what you would advise people to do when they go on this journey, like of storytelling in general? Like, is it okay to not know what your end goal is?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I joke about this with relationships because people are, people get all weird and they're like, what if it ends? And I'm like, there's 3 endings. Like, you die, they die, you break up before one of you dies. Those are the endings to the relationship.
Or you say, I guess, I guess you can't stay in the other.
You could say there's 2 endings. One of you dies, or you guys break up before one of you dies.
Okay.
That's not the interesting part.
Yeah.
There's a short story by Margaret Atwood called Happy Endings. There's 3 stories that I reread over and over and over again. And that's one of them. And Happy Endings by Margaret Atwood it's just her comment on story structure as an author. And it's only a page and a half long. And she breaks every section into, it's like A, B, C, D, all the way through F. And each section takes 2 characters and tells the story of their life in a totally different way. And the first section is like, John and Mary meet, they get married, they have worthwhile and remunerative jobs, they have 2 children to whom they are devoted, and then they die.
The American dream.
Yeah, exactly. And then she very slowly goes down the list and just tortures her characters just to make the point that, that plot is only interesting when you have conflict, and nobody would want to hear a story in which you didn't have conflict. And she finally ends it with this beautiful line where she says, it's something about how endings are always coming and there's nothing special about them. But true connoisseurs are always known to favor the bit in the middle. And so I've become much more of a journey person than I am a destination person.
I need to read that because I'm very much a destination person. I love that lesson. And I think it's really interesting in this application when you think about marketing and building a brand, building a story.
That's what's so fun about it. Yeah, that's like, when I look back on it, it was absolute chaos. it was like me burning adrenaline, like living on adrenaline for 6 months, never sleeping well because I was so afraid, and just continuously trying to do new things and learning things, and then like trying to hold together all these clients at once and trying to serve everybody and trying to make sure that I was doing it right. And then it all turned into something.
Mm.
But there wasn't any plan. In the beginning, the plan was survive
Yeah.
and do work that I feel proud of. I spent my 20s being a vagabond and traveling to as many places as I could and seeing the world and experiencing everything I possibly could. And I want the rest of my life to be about solving big problems with people that I like being with.
To kind of wrap up our episode, what got you to this place where you wanted to share this message with people about storytelling?
It's a combination of wanting recognition and also wanting to be known so that I don't go through the painful situation again. It's a combination of that. It's a combination of irritation at that we insist on making this very exciting thing we do so boring when we're like messaging the public. And I've always loved stories. I mean, ever since I was a little kid, literacy was my gifted area. I've been reading chapter books since I was 4 years old. And I've just always been able to lose myself in incredible stories. And there's so much of that in the world. And there's so much of that in what we're doing in clean energy. And we do ourselves such a disservice when we're just like, here's a graph that shows what we're doing. Like, it's somewhere in there, isn't there like someone who's doing something that maybe we could hear about that is probably a very cool person?
Yeah. Yeah. Someone that like is relatable. This means a lot to me because I've worked in corporate America for, my whole career. And whenever somebody brings me into a room and shows me a graph about, 'cause I've been in sales my whole career. So I get a lot of graphs and I get a lot of like KPIs and metrics and how we're tracking and so on. And I always kind of disassociate during these conversations because they're very stressful because usually you're missing the mark when you're having these conversations. But also it doesn't mean anything
Exactly.
to me. It completely misses the mark in the impact of like, okay, well, then I should do something about this. Instead, it just makes me anxious and afraid.
Right.
Where, if we sat down and talked about maybe what is the struggle of why, so and so didn't make this sale or whatever the case may be, then I can unpack that and find some comfort in doing it better next time, like finding where I can improve. But a graph just doesn't do it for me. And numbers really, I forget them instantaneously.
Yeah. And you're not alone. I think it's important to note that as well, that there's a lot of social science to suggest that numbers decay in the mind, but stories are what we're wired to remember. Like we got 200,000 years of sitting around campfires telling each other where the honey is. And we got like a couple hundred years of graphs.
Hopefully we're almost at the end of that graph cycle.
I want to hark back on that idea that we don't actually speak numbers. We just pretend that we do. And that when we try to package what we're doing in that way, we lose so many people, because it's like 50% of America isn't above a 5th grade reading level. And so we're just creating content for an echo chamber of people who already agree with us. And we're not using emotion to resonate in the ways that most of the world finds most interesting. And I think we really leave behind what's beautiful about what we're doing when we do that. And I also like to say, this is a line that kills whenever I get on stage, is how many of you have ever gotten in an emotional argument with your significant other and showed them a graph? to prove that you were right. And then one engineer will raise his hand and I'll be like, and how did that go? And he'll be like, not well. Yeah. Of course. But you think you can do that to strangers.
Yeah. Yeah. And like in mass, I bet my boss has done that before. He loves a good graph argument.
Yeah. And I'm not, it's not that there's no place for them. I think that's what people misunderstand about what I'm saying. It's not that there's no place for data. Data is obviously tremendously important.
Yeah.
It's just that it has to be brought down to earth.
Yeah.
Like there's a reason that you can remember the horror story your cousin told you when you were 12, but the numbers on the bar charts in the last white paper you pretended to read, it just slid right out of your head.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. You're right. And I think that's an important distinction, that there is a place for data, and it's not always in like bite-sized pieces when you're trying to get an initial message out about a story.
Yeah. It's on the back of a story.
Anything else that you want to talk about today that maybe hasn't organically come up?
I just want to harp back on that message that if you're going through a search and you're just so desperately trying to find like someone who fits qualifications that you made up that you think you need for a job, you might be wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You might want to open it up and just go with the most creative person or the most passionate person,
mm-hmm.
and give someone a chance to really shine.
Mm.
Because, I think I'm doing okay.
You might be surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like that. Like take a flyer out on someone that is showing authenticity and desire and creativity in approach, maybe than like the perfect cookie cutter candidate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Well, I have had so much fun.
Yeah, me too.
This evening doing this. I'm so grateful that we live close together and can potentially do this again. So thank you for coming over and doing Talent Current with me. It was so great to do this.
Of course. Yeah. I'll make the drive anytime.
Thank you.
This is your host, Mindy Prefling, and that's it for this episode of the Talent Current. Thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed the conversation, please be sure to subscribe and share. I'll be back soon with more insights to keep you connected to how our industry is changing and the people shaping what's next.